Hello, everyone. Welcome. Liz, I'm just checking that I'm unmuted. Yes. Um, so we will begin today with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the denominational office of the Presbyterian Church in Canada is located on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, the Huron-Wendat, the Petun, Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge the land's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon it, and whose practices and spiritualities were connected to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the land and to its other inhabitants today. We acknowledge as we meet to talk about safety in the church that the church has sometimes failed to be a place of safety. We confess our failings and we apologize. We reaffirm our commitment to healing and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. The policy we will look at today focuses on the church's life, on the people who lead and serve, both paid and volunteer, on the people who are served by the church, and on the church's activities and ministries. The policy applies to everyone who participates in the worship life and activities of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. The policy of the Presbyterian Church in Canada is that harassment of any kind shall not be tolerated and will be addressed. The seminar is designed to help you understand the church's position on harassment and the expectations we have of behavior, both your conduct in the church and the conduct of others towards you. You will also learn how to respond if you experience harassment within the church's activities. In addition, the seminar will help church employers and employees to understand their specific responsibilities that arise from this policy. And after reviewing some key details of the policy, there'll be time for questions and answers, questions and discussion at the end. Foundation of the policy is found in its theological basis and guiding principles. The Presbyterian Church in Canada understands that its life should be characterized by the highest expression of Christian fellowship, as taught by Christ and the New Testament epistles. Christ intends the church to be a safe place to exercise, share, and receive ministry. However, when our lives do not reflect God's love, harassment can take place in the congregation's courts and committees of the church. Responding to harassment promptly, carefully, and appropriately helps the church to become the welcoming community that Christ calls it to be. There are several guiding principles. All complaints of harassment will be received, investigated, and acted on as specified in this policy. The person complained against is always presumed innocent until proven guilty. Allegations of a sexual nature will be addressed using the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment. No retaliation is permitted against a person who makes a complaint in good faith. Persons making a complaint of harassment retain the right to apply to a human rights tribunal or to pursue any other available legal avenues. The church is called to implement this policy in the spirit of prayerfulness, love, affection, and humility under the continual illumination of the Holy Spirit. Just before we move on from these foundational pieces, the theological basis and the guiding principles, we would encourage you, whenever you're working with a committee to deal with a harassment complaint, that you urge your companions to take the time to review these theological basis and guiding principles, not just to dive right into, so what do we do first and what do we do second? They are important, and there's value in the investigating committee in reviewing them before you begin your work together. The policy defines and describes different types of harassing behavior. Harassment means physical or verbal behaviors that are directed against a member, adherent, volunteer, or employee of the church, and that are unwelcome or should be known to be unwelcome. Harassment occurs when someone makes unwelcome remarks or jokes about a person, threatens or intimidates a person, or makes unwelcome physical contact with a person. Harassment is usually behavior that persists over time. However, it may be considered harassment with a one-time incident if the incident is serious enough. Bullying is the use of force, coercion, hurtful teasing, or threat by one person to abuse, dominate, or aggressively intimidate another person. Bullying requires a perceived imbalance of physical or social power. The bully has or is perceived to have more power than the victim. Bullying takes different forms. Physical bullying uses physical force or aggression against others, for instance, by hitting. Verbal bullying uses words to hurt others, for instance, by name calling. Social or relational bullying seeks to intimidate or harm others by excluding them, spreading rumors, or ignoring them. And cyberbullying uses electronic media to threaten, embarrass, intimidate, or exclude others, including seeking to damage their reputation. What's important for us to know using this policy is that both harassment and bullying are encompassed under the word harassment in this policy. Discrimination is an action or a decision that treats a person or a group badly for reasons such as their race, sex, age, or disability. Human rights codes in Canada identify personal characteristics that are protected from discrimination. This list includes race, religion, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability. These personal characteristics are protected against discrimination. They are referred to as prohibited grounds of discrimination. The human rights codes protect people from discrimination on one or more of the grounds in 5 different parts of society. These are called social areas. Employment is one of the protected social areas, and that's what gives it prominence within this policy. A workplace is defined, refers to any location, whether permanent or temporary, where an employee performs any work-related duty. Employers have the responsibility of providing employees with a workplace that is free of harassment. Conduct is considered workplace harassment if it creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment, or if it interferes with the employee's work performance so that the person isn't able to do their best at work. One of the questions that all employers are going to face is what is permitted as they supervise and what should be prohibited because it would be considered harassment. Supervision of workers and the workplace is permitted. Employers or supervisors are permitted to take reasonable actions to manage and direct workers and the workplace. Examples of reasonable action include constructive criticism of an employee, evaluating or monitoring an employee's performance, setting performance standards, and correction or discipline of an employee. Such reasonable action by the employer is not considered to be workplace harassment. Racial harassment is unwanted or unwelcome oral, written, or physical conduct relating to a person's race, culture, nationality, or ethnicity. This policy is used to address complaints of racial harassment. Sexual harassment involves unwelcome comment or conduct of a sexual nature, including repeated sexual remarks or physical conduct that is degrading. It includes a sexual advance by a person in a position to confer, grant, or deny a benefit to another. And it includes the threat by a person in authority against a person who has rejected a sexual advance from that person in authority. The policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment is used whenever the alleged harassment includes behavior of a sexual nature, such as improper or unwelcome comment or conduct pertaining to sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. In these cases, the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment is used. Making a complaint is not always the immediate response to an experience of harassment. Sometimes there are other considerations that take precedence. Safety from violence. When violence is experienced or witnessed, the correct immediate response is to call 911. First, ensure that everyone is safe and medical care as needed has been provided. A person who alleges harassment is free to contact the police. Church procedures are suspended during a police investigation. Sometimes a person who believes they've been the victim of harassment may feel reasonably confident that resolution could be achieved through a direct conversation with the alleged harasser. Such direct conversation should be attempted only at the request of the alleged victim. Both parties are required to have a support person present. In some situations, a direct conversation is not safe or practical, and in all cases, neither party should be pressured to participate. Complainants retain the right to apply to a human rights tribunal or to pursue any other available legal avenues, even while they have come to the church with their complaint. In this overview of the complaint process, we'll first of all look at some vocabulary. The complainant is the person making the complaint about being a victim of harassment. The respondent is the person alleged to have engaged in harassment of the complainant. The respondent may also be referred to as the alleged harasser or the alleged offender. The complaint sets out the details of the alleged harassment. The complaint is written where possible, but oral complaints are also permitted to start the process. One of the questions that immediately comes to mind is who will address a complaint once the church has received one. It depends on the response. It depends on the responsibility. I'm sorry, let me start again. The responsibility for addressing the complaint rests with the church body to whom the respondent is accountable. In the case of minister, where the allegations is about the conduct of a minister, that's going to be addressed by the minister's presbytery. When the allegation is about the conduct of a congregational member, adherent, or office bearer, that will be addressed by the congregation session. When the allegation is about the conduct of a lay church employee, that will be addressed by the governing body of the church employer or by its designate. However, there's one important exception. When allegations are about the conduct of a member, adherent, or office bearer of a congregation, when that allegation is being made by the minister of the congregation, the complaint will be addressed by the minister's presbytery. Complaints are presented to the clerk or moderator of the church court that is going to be addressing the complaint, or in the case of an employee, by the supervisor of the employee. The complaints process has a number of steps. There's receiving the complaint, investigating it, making a decision about whether harassment did in fact occur, assigning corrective action or discipline when harassment was found to have happened, communicating the results of the complaint process, and keeping records of the proceedings. The complaint should contain the following information: the complainant's name and contact information, information about the respondent, name, and position in the church, as well as the respondent's contact information, witness name and contact information if there are any witnesses in the situation, a description of the situations or incidents, including dates, times, frequency, locations, any supporting documents, and also a list of documents that the complainant believes a witness or the respondent might have in their possession. The investigating committee is made up of up to 3 members. At least 1 member should be a member of the court of jurisdiction. The alleged harasser is not able to be a member of the committee, nor does the alleged harasser supervise any member of the committee. Committee members are able to be objective about the individuals and the information they will consider while they investigate the complaint. And committee members are familiar with this policy and may have received training in its use. The investigating committee begins its work promptly. Since cases vary in complexity, some investigations may be completed within a few days, while others may require more time. Every effort should be made to conduct the investigation and complete the report within the 30 days. Steps should be taken to ensure the safety and comfort of the complainant. This could involve imposing the requirement that no contact occurs between the complainant and the respondent during the investigation. If further offense is considered a risk, the respondent may be removed from the court or event or temporarily suspended with pay from employment. It should be clear that any such restrictions are understood to be on a without prejudice basis. This means that there's no assumption that the respondent has committed the alleged harassing behavior. Pastoral care is made available to the complainant and the respondent. And the investigating committee makes sure that each party has or knows how to access any pastoral support that they might want. It needs to be noted that no member of the investigating committee is permitted to serve as pastoral caregiver to the complainant or to the respondent. The investigating committee may explain the church's complaint procedures to the complainant and to the respondent as it meets with them, and the investigating committee make sure that each party knows how to access any additional help if desired. And in those cases when a respondent is suspended temporarily from employment, the church employer needs to be provided with appropriate information in a timely manner. The investigation will be handled in a confidential manner. Disclosure of information will occur only when it is necessary to investigate, to take corrective action, or as might be required by law. The information gathered by the committee is assessed according to a balance of probabilities. What would a reasonable person believe took place? How credible are the different versions of the events? This standard of proof is the same as is used in civil suits in Canada. The investigation steps, it involves a series of interviews during which the committee collects information from the perspectives of the complainant, the respondent, and any witnesses. The committee meets separately with each person that it interviews. Any documents provided by those individuals are collected and reviewed, and interview notes are taken. There's an important sequence of interviews in this process. The committee meets first with the complainant. A written statement of the complaint is prepared, and that's signed by the complainant. The committee then meets with the respondent and presents the written complaint. The committee hears the response of the respondent, and a written statement of the respondent's response to the complaint is prepared and signed by the respondent. The third step, the committee meets with the complainant again. The respondent's written response to the complaint is presented, and the committee hears what the complainant wants to say, having read the respondent's comments. I'll just step aside here for a minute to tell you something that I've observed in the last year or so that is it's an anecdote from community life. It's not church life, but I was aware of an organization that received a complaint of behavior against the code of conduct that the organization had. Of course, the organization wanted to, they didn't just talk to the complainant, they also talked to the respondent. You would never just take what the complainant said at face value and make a judgment on the complaint based on that. They also went to the respondent. But having talked first to the complainant and then to the respondent, the organization then made its decision and found in favor of the respondent. What I realized as I saw this situation from a distance unfold is that by not going back to the complainant to say how the respondent had, what respondent had said about the complaint, effectively they gave the respondent the chance to make a complaint without any further investigation of it. So the respondent basically counter-complained, said all sorts of horrible things about the complainant, but there was never any fact-checking of that, or even just to see the response of the complainant. As I saw this story unfold, I realized how excellent is the process that we've used for years in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, because it doesn't allow a counter-complaint that has no verification happening. After conducting any witness interviews, normally the committee would meet again with the complainant and with the respondent, again to see how they respond to the comments that they've heard from a witness. The end product of the committee's work is its report to the church body that's addressing the complaint. The committee summarizes its work and the information it's collected, and then it offers recommendations. It provides its assessment of the complaint and any corrective action or discipline of the respondent in those cases where they are upholding the complaint. The decision about whether harassment did occur, it belongs to the church body that must handle the complaint. The church body meets privately. It receives and considers the report of its investigating committee. All decisions about the complaint require the majority vote of the members of the church body who attend the meeting. The church body decides one of two possible outcomes. Either the complaint has been substantiated on a balance of probabilities, or the complaint has not been substantiated on a balance of probabilities. If the complaint is deemed to be substantiated, the church body moves to considerations of corrective action or discipline. If the complaint is deemed to be not substantiated, the complaint is dismissed. When the complaint has been substantiated, the church body decides what corrective action or discipline for the respondent will be imposed. The person found to have engaged in harassment is disciplined appropriately. A corrective action or discipline must be reasonable and proportionate to the harassment that has been found to have occurred. Corrective action or discipline may include any necessary steps to prevent a recurrence. For church employees, corrective action or discipline may include suspension without pay, dismissal from employment, the requirement to offer an apology, an agreement to take training, or an oral or written covenant outlining future behavior that the respondent promises to uphold, or other remedies. For members or adherents, the options are similar to those for employees, except that suspension or termination can apply only to the roles that the respondent has been undertaking as a volunteer. Both the complainant and the respondent are informed of the decisions made by the church body about the complaint and any corrective action or discipline to be imposed on the respondent. The church body addressing the complaint will offer a means to resolve the matter in a manner that is acceptable to both the complainant and the respondent, if possible. Both the complainant and the respondent have the right to initiate a disciplinary case if they are unsatisfied with the results of the investigation and any corrective action or discipline imposed on the respondent. And the Book of Forms outlines these steps. Records of all complaints of harassment will be kept by the court of jurisdiction or by the employer in a secure, locked location. The list of records to be included is outlined in some detail in the policy document. All records remain confidential. Disclosure is permitted only as necessary for investigation, for corrective action, or as required by law. And all records are kept for 2 years from the conclusion of the investigation, or longer if the court requires. Section on workplace responsibilities will look at the roles of both employers and employees. Church employers must ensure that their employees understand the church's position on harassment and expectations of behavior. They also need to ensure that their employees know how to respond if they experience harassment. Church employers should also teach their congregations about harassment, affirming the church's zero tolerance for harassment, affirming the church's commitment to address all complaints of harassment, and fostering awareness and understanding of the church's procedures to address harassment. These conversations can go a long way to helping create a safe environment where harassment is not experienced. All employees have the right to a safe and professional workplace, but they also must act professionally and contribute to the church being a safe place for all. This applies to their conduct at all times and places where they are performing any work-related duty. The different human rights codes in Canada include different lists of prohibited grounds of discrimination. And so for that reason, it's important that individuals who are using this policy, for employers in particular, to review the legislation that applies to their jurisdiction. The list that was given earlier of things that can be prohibited grounds of discrimination were the ones that were common across all provinces and territories in Canada. But there are some other ones added in various places. So understanding what applies in your jurisdiction is important. The church's support for this policy includes providing advice and training for investigating committees when requested, protecting people who make covenants in good faith, considering discipline for malicious complaints, training of employees and volunteers, and reviewing this policy. Members of the investigating committee are permitted to contact national office staff for advice and some training, but such requests are permitted but not required. The church will not tolerate retaliation against anyone for making a complaint of harassment in good faith, for reporting suspected discrimination or harassment, or for cooperating in an investigation. Regardless of whether harassment is found to have occurred, such retaliation is a violation of this policy. Anyone who makes a malicious complaint of harassment may be subject to disciplinary action. All employees and volunteers of the church are to receive training on the contents of this policy. This policy must be read at least annually by sessions, ministry boards, presbyteries, synods, camps, colleges, and standing committees. The Life and Mission Agency will conduct a review at least every 3 years to ensure the policy continues to comply with applicable legislation. And now I believe it's time for any questions and comments and discussion.